Coram Farm. We are a year 4 Oklahoma flower farm that sells retail market bouquets from our roadside stand. And in today's video, we're going to talk all about how to price your flowers and things to think about. But before we start that, I wanted to acknowledge the map behind me because a couple videos back, we asked everyone to comment where they're listening from because we have people all over the US, people all over the world, and I've added pins. We had so many Canadian viewers, which was super fun. I think we're at like 40 states now, although I suspect we have one from each. I need to add one up in Alaska. But the thing that surprised me most was how many European countries we had. And then we also had tons of wonderful viewers in Australia. I think the farthest away ones was Japan. And recently we got Paraguay, which I need to add. But I just thought that was really fun. So thank you to all of you that participated in our fun Where in the World Are You Flower Farming video. So we're going to talk about pricing in today's video. I know, especially if you're a newer grower, that pricing is really hard. You're asking like, I don't know, am I undercharging? Oh my gosh, I'm nervous to charge that much. What do each stem cost? What do I do? How do I figure it out? So we're going to talk about it in this video. In the last video, if you haven't watched it yet, that we put out, and I can link it below, we talked all about the various ways to sell your flowers, and how you're selling your flowers will determine how you price your flowers. So if you haven't watched that video, I would really encourage you to. It'll give you a lot of like foundational context to what I'm talking about here. But the Cliff Notes is basically you have wholesale, you have retail, and then you have wedding and event work pricing. And all of those flowers, you know, we're talking about bunches or per stem cost for your flowers. And depending on how you're selling, that's going to depend on wholesale, retail, or wedding and event work and how you price your flowers. But I'm looking down here because I have all my notes. But first, I want to talk to you beginners, and I would categorize beginners as probably like going into year 3 or younger as more of a beginner flower farmer, and then like year 4 and above, you're getting into more of like confident or advanced categories. So I want to talk to you beginners first. And the first thing I want to say is don't overcomplicate thinking about pricing, because it can feel very overwhelming. And one of the things that makes pricing feel very overwhelming in the beginning is all of the expenses and information you need to track in order to determine your cost to grow each flower. And as you're trying to narrow down your crop list, as you're trying to figure out how you want to sell your flowers, as you're learning how to market and figure out your customers and what they want, you're learning how to grow. There's so much going on that's hard to track, and your numbers also might not be the most accurate. And so while I think it's important to, of course, track your expenses and everything you're spending money on, it can get trickier to track your time and your labor, and then like all of the little bits and bobs that you spend money on and that it takes you to grow these flowers. And so I think in the beginning, it's less about really drilling down and knowing your exact numbers and more about going on like averages and generalities for your pricing. And then as you grow, as you expand your business, expand your skills, you get into like year 4 and beyond, and you start, you have your efficiencies, you have the way you do things, you have your crop plan and how you sell and your pricing, you can start to fine tune it and really dig down deeper. For you beginners, I just think it can overly stress things and it not truly end up helping you as much as you think maybe it would in the beginning. So that's my first tip, is not to overcomplicate getting your exact pricing correct. That also doesn't mean you want to completely wing it, because if you wing it and you're not working with like generalities and averages, you could be really underpricing your flowers, and then you're not making the profit that you should, or the revenue that you need to pay for your expenses in order to keep flower farming, to stay in business and continue to expand and grow your business. So underpricing is the biggest risk early on in making it difficult for your business to succeed and for you to continue growing and being a flower farmer. So yeah, this is my point number 3, is more than likely you're not charging enough. I think if I were to like canvas the big flower farming Facebook groups and Instagram and stuff, the biggest, most common problem seen from newbies is underpricing. You're selling a $15 retail market bunch and it has 15 stems in it, 8 of them being specialty focals, and you're charging $15 and it took you 10 minutes to make that bouquet. That seems to be generally what is happening, and that is a big underpricing problem. So if you're starting out and you really want to think about your pricing, you're probably going to go into it with, I'm underpricing and I need to make some corrections in how I price each of my flowers. And then once you take those prices, it makes it so that you can better create a bouquet recipe, so that at your $15 or $20 or $25 price point, you're making a profitable bouquet because you've figured out the right per stem pricing you need to be working with, and you're not undercharging per stem, and you're not overstuffing your bouquets and tanking your revenue and profit capabilities. So more often than not, we have underpricing problems rather than, oh my gosh, I can't believe you charged that much money for that bouquet. I see that way less often than I see overstuffed, underpriced flowers. And that's also what I'm hearing from veteran growers that have been doing it for like 8+ years. They see primarily only underpricing and overstuffing rather than you're asking too much for what a product is worth. So that's another step. Let's talk about what to do. You're a beginner. You don't have all this data and tracking of all your information and labor and expenses of what each crop costs you to grow, and you're just trying to get some general baseline understanding of what to charge per flower that you grow in your crop plan. We'll do a little asterisk here and say, if you watched my channel, our channel, long enough, you know that I rant all the time about not growing too many flowers and having a streamlined crop plan. And another reason amongst 100 is when you go to price per stem for your crop, if you have 40 different flowers to figure out what you should charge for that flower, one, it's hard to keep track of, especially when you go to make bouquet recipes and you're like, I have 19 things blooming and I need to use them somehow so they don't get wasted in the field, and I have to figure out the price per stem for all of them. Then I have to figure out a profitable recipe to use, and then I have to go harvest all of them and actually make those bouquets. It's a nightmare. Stop growing so many flowers. Put down the flower catalog. In the beginning, you do not need this. So if you have a smaller crop plan, this makes it a lot easier to go through each of your flowers. But the first step that you can do is figure out what each flower is being sold at the wholesale cost locally to your area. And the reason I think it's important to stress locally to your area is pricing can be very regionally dependent, especially for certain flowers, because it either is super easy to grow that flower where you are, and so the pricing, there's more in the market, and so that brings the price down, or you're working really hard to grow a flower that's challenging in your area. It's harder to get, it's more rare. You can charge more of a premium for that flower than you could otherwise. An example for us would be peonies. If I was just talking to my friend Ruth Ann, you guys should check out her YouTube channel. I'll put it in the link below because she does a wonderful job talking about wholesale and selling to florists and stuff. I was texting with her the other day and we were talking about peonies, and what she can charge for a peony in Michigan is way less than what we charge for a peony in Oklahoma, because it's so much more rare and challenging to grow peonies in Oklahoma than it would be in Michigan. And so that matters. So if you were to go to like the Boston terminal list or some big national wholesaler and get a cost, that might not be the most helpful to you specifically in your area, and you might be leaving money on the table, because if I priced my peonies at a Michigan cost, I would just be losing out on more money than I could make. The inverse of that would be, for example, like celosia is super easy for us to grow here because we get hot very quickly and we stay hot for a long time. And so celosia loves it here. We have hot, fire burning summers. We start hot in April and we don't cool off until October. Celosia is just, if you give it water, it is super happy here, and we can grow thousands of stems of celosia. Now, if you're trying to go celosia in coastal Oregon, where spring lasts a much longer time, it takes longer to heat up, you don't have as many sunny days, it's more of a challenge to grow celosia there, and so it's going to be more rare. There's going to be less of it in the market. I can't charge as much for celosia here as maybe someone pushing the limits, growing it in the tunnel, or doing other sorts of things to get celosia earlier or in more abundance in like coastal Oregon, coastal Washington. They can charge more than I can. So I would suggest not necessarily only deferring to a national wholesale list. It can be a good starting point, but you still want to be asking these questions of yourself. Where are you regionally? How common is that flower? How easy is it to grow? How easy is it for people to get it or for florists to get it? And figure out if you're dealing with something that's more specialty for your area and try to get more money for it, or, you know, make those adjustments. So find a local wholesaler to you. You know, like if I wanted to do that, there's a distributor in Tulsa that's a wholesaler. I can reach out to them, sign up for their list. I can see what their pricing is. That's a good way to start locally in our Oklahoma area. Another thing you can do is reach out to flower farmers that are in your state or your region and ask for their pricing lists. Now, obviously, it's a little bit trickier relationally doing this. I would suggest maybe not like hitting up the flower farmer that's like 5 miles down the road from you, and maybe someone like on the other side of the state, or maybe someone you've already DM'd and chatted with and you have a relationship with, to ask, because some growers are a little more cagey about their pricing. They're not as open with their operations and they might not want to share that information, and I think it's fine. I do not think they have to share that sort of information. So just be, if you do that, which I think is wise, just be just have tact, be tactical about who you reach out to. I'm blessed to have a relationship with Allison, who you've seen on the channel. She only sells wholesale. She lives like 45 minutes away from me. Sometimes when I'm thinking about raising my prices or making any adjustments, I will text her and I'll be like, hey, what are you selling, you know, wholesale Lysianthus for? And I can see what her price is and kind of adjust it to my retail price and get an idea. And she's happy to share with me because we don't overlap and we don't compete with each other. We have a good flower farmer relationship. And so I would encourage you to find those sorts of people in your state or your region to help you with pricing and get a good idea if you're in the ballpark for your own. You're not under any obligation to perfectly match their pricing, but it is always helpful to know, are you coming in significantly under or charging way more than people are around you, in order to be, you know, competitive and also not a race to the bottom. So you've done that. You've reached out to your local wholesaler. You've reached out to maybe some local flower farmers. You're getting a baseline for the wholesale cost. In order to determine your retail pricing, you want to take those numbers and you want to double or triple them. In order to triple them, you need to be in more of a metropolitan area or in an area that is more affluent, where your customers have my phone is on, sorry guys. You want to be in an area with more disposable income. And so if you are very rural, or you're in a very small town, or you're in a more economically depressed area, it's going to be a lot harder to get that 3 times amount. But for retail, you should be charging twice, or within the range of twice, what wholesale is. it gets a little, again, this helps you with generalities, but there's always a bit of a gray area. And an example of that would be, I am rural in a smaller town, and I do not do 3 times. I do 2 times wholesale, but sometimes it's not perfectly 2 times because I'm comparing, like if I'm comparing to Allison's pricing, Allison lives near a very affluent area of Tulsa, and she sells to wedding and event florists that are working with very affluent clients with big event budgets. And so she can charge and make a good profit on her ranunculus, her lisianthus, a lot of her specialty crops that I can't perfectly double because she's already charging a bit higher end of that wholesale range because of where she is. And so our places don't perfectly match. So it becomes a little bit more apples to oranges, and you have to make those micro adjustments to who you're selling to, where you're at, in order to determine your pricing. But that's for retail. If you are doing wedding and event work, it's usually 5 times the amount of that wholesale pricing that you've determined as your baseline, or you've determined your retail pricing. You're going to end up charging a lot more for wedding and event work. So, as a beginner, I would look to a local wholesaler and a local grower. Now you're saying to yourself, like, okay, Alex, but like I can't figure out a wholesaler near me, or I'm too shy to reach out to a local grower, or I'm not sure what to do. Or you're just like, Alex, I don't want to do it. I want you to just give me the answer. I will link below. We have a stem pricing sheet on our Patreon. It's a downloadable PDF where I just give you my retail pricing for all 14 flowers that we grow. We grow very standard flower farming flowers. And so if you just want that, either you want it as like a baseline to check your own numbers, or you just want to start out charging what we do, and you just want that and you don't want to do all the other stuff, you can just buy that separately, or you can sign up for our Patreon. It can just be a one-time purchase if you want that PDF. So I'll link that below. I think it's really helpful because I didn't have access to that when we were starting, and I did feel like I was floundering a little bit trying to figure out what is a good price for a lisianthus or a good price for a marigold. And our pricing, I think, is very standard. It is for very middle of the country, more rural pricing. You know, I'm not selling to a Philadelphia wedding florist in how I price things. And so if you're at all similar to us, I think that pricing sheet would be really helpful and give you at least a launching point. You can always make micro adjustments, you know, up or down, you know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, you could charge $2.25 for something that I charge $2 for, or you could drop it a little bit, and that might be helpful to you. But then if you take that pricing sheet and you also buy or join our Patreon for this, our bouquet recipes then also make a lot more sense when you see our pricing sheets, and it becomes a lot easier to be putting together those $20 and $25 bouquet recipes. So I'm more than happy to share with you our pricing if that helps you, especially as a beginner. But now if you are in the more advanced or entering into the advanced category, like you're entering year 4, or you really feel like you're dialing in your crop plan, in your process of how you farm, and you want to get more technical, this is where you need to start tracking a lot more of your expenses. And the best way to do that is to pick a handful of crops, and whether you're like an iPhone person or a notebook person, every single time you do something for that crop, you want to write it down, whether you know, had to buy new landscape fabric or T-posts or netting or plugs or fertilizer or anything. Anytime you're doing something for that crop, you want to be writing that down. And then you also want to be writing down how much time you've spent on that crop, because some crops like sunflowers are direct seed and walk away more or less, versus like dahlias, which are way more labor intensive. You want to be writing down your labor tracking, and then you can figure out from there what it costs you to grow 100 feet of zinnias, with tracking that sort of data. And then you can really say like, okay, it costs me $400 to grow from start to finish 100 feet of zinnias. That's really important data. And then figuring out your pricing and then what your profit margin is. If I charge $2 a stem, I average this many stems per row and it costs me $500, then you can start seeing that difference and know where your profit is in a more specific way. If this is where you're at and you really want to jump in with both feet, if you've watched our interview with Lenny Larkin, I really enjoy my friendship with Lenny. I enjoy learning from her because she is so detail and data driven that she's told me that she is working on a mini course. So not a super expensive, like much bigger commitment course, but like where you can only sign up for it in January and that sort of thing. But like a one and done, you can buy the course on pricing and how to track that data, what data to be tracking, how to use that data for pricing and all of that. So if that's where you're headed and that's where you want to take your farm and really drill down more on those sorts of details, I'll put a link in the description of signing up for her wait list of getting info when she releases that. It's going to be, I think, less than $100, mini course, probably going to be really, really helpful for those of you that want to get more exact in your pricing. So those are two good options. You can go with us and get, know our pricing and launch with that. And then for those of you that want to advance and kind of go up the next level, you can sign up for Lenny's course or at least her wait list where she'll give you more information about it if you're interested. But last couple comments here at the end. Underpricing. I know that especially as a beginner, you trend emotionally towards underpricing because either you just don't know what to charge and it's ignorance, which our stem pricing sheet, the tips here can help solve the ignorance problem. So that shouldn't be an excuse anymore. So we'll take that one off the excuse list of underpricing. Another thing is just simply confidence. When you're starting out and you're trying to build customers, you're trying to build a business, you can feel insecure about like, well, should I really be charging $2 a stem for a sunflower? That seems like a lot. I'm just going to charge $1 because I'm just starting out. And then you end up underpricing. And underpricing is simply not sustainable. So you remove the emotional element of it. Underpricing is not putting your business in a position where you can continue doing this. And the whole point of starting a business, and especially with flower farming, is because you want to grow flowers, you want to farm, you want to do this. And so you need to be able to stay in business in order to continue to do it. So there is nothing short of just satisfying an emotional insecurity that underpricing helps you. It decreases your potential revenue, so then you have less funds available to continue to expand. From a marketing and a brand perspective, it sets you at a lower price point with your customers, and so they start to expect that. And so then once you realize what you really need to charge, it's a bit trickier raising prices because all of us are customers ourselves, and when businesses raise the price, we're not exactly jumping for joy. So that becomes a trickier marketing lift for you to increase your prices after you've started at a certain price point. Or let's say you're overstuffing your bouquets wildly and you realize, oh my gosh, like next year's bouquets need to have like 8 stems less than I've been giving customers at that same price point. The whole shrinkflation thing, sizeflation, they're going to notice that. And so it behooves you to start as you mean to go on. So really be thinking about your pricing and then your bouquet compositions so that you're giving your customers something that they can continue to expect, and you're not going to have a big oops moment when you realize you're not making enough money to sustain this business and keep going, and you have to make much bigger changes that maybe will end up losing you customers or just being a customer service PR nightmare a bit with having to make those adjustments. If you're in that situation, don't panic. All is not lost, but recognize that the underpricing is just simply not sustainable for you and your business. And you're going to need to figure out how to confidently charge what your flowers are worth so that you can keep going and you can be profitable. But now I know that you're probably saying to me on the screen, yeah, but Sally Joe down the road charges half of what I know I need to charge. So she's selling $10 bunches and I know I need to sell $20 bunches to make money. What do I do? Well, the first thing is, don't participate in a race to the bottom competition with down the road. It doesn't help either of you to just like keep charging less than the other until you just get to like nonsense prices. That's not what you want to do tactically in your pricing. The second thing is, those prices are not sustainable to her. So I don't know if her husband gave her a big budget stipend to lose their money underpricing or what's going on, but they're not going to be able to do it for years and years, because very few people can just operate at a loss year in and year out and it not be a problem, or they not decide that they're done with it and that was a fun hobby for a couple years that lost them money and then they move on to some other dream. That is usually what happens. And so if people are significantly underpricing, you're just probably going to need to extend patience, recognizing that that's not sustainable to them. Another thing is branding. You don't need to do the race to the bottom or feel super flustered if Sally Joe is underpricing, because branding is in your control. And if you think about it, Starbucks is not in a pricing race to the bottom with Folgers coffee, because they're not the same thing. They're not the same quality. They're not the same taste. They're not selling to the same people and what people are looking for in their buying habits for those two brands. All of us, like basic white girls, love to go get our Starbucks cup of coffee and walk around Target, and it's a thing. And that's because they've branded it as such. And so you need to apply that same mentality to your business. And instead of competing with $10 Sally Joe, make people see that your $20, $25 bouquet is premium and it's specialty and it, beautiful logo or beautiful wrapping, or they love following you as a person for the business on your social media. They connect with you. I have a lot of followers that follow us not because I grow the best Snapdragon in the land, but because I'm a mom who homeschools with 5 kids, or we're Christian. There's lots of identifying factors with our brand that people connect to. That's not just like the most basic, you have objectively the best flowers, and that's the only reason I buy from you or connect with you. And so ignore cheapy Sally Joe and focus on creating a brand through marketing where people will pay that price, and then you're more sustainable with your revenue and your profit because of it. And I've said in other videos, if you don't like marketing and branding, then it is going to be a challenge for you to not put any effort into building your brand and then charge $20 to people that don't know you or your brand when they do see the $10 option. So Chanel charges what Chanel charges because of their marketing, not because they're the only ones that can make, a beautiful dress. So think about that and consider, before we all launch our year, going through your crop plan, assigning a price per stem for all of your flowers and using that throughout the year to make profitable bouquet recipes, to know that you're not undercharging and just winging it throughout the year. But launch your season with a really good organization of price per stem. Start working on bouquet recipes. If you don't want to do that and you want to just copy ours, I'm fine with that. You can get our bouquet recipes for $20 and $25 that are based on that stem pricing sheet. But kind of like front load your year with doing a lot of this thinking, because then obviously when we're like drowning in harvests and planting and seed starting and all of that, it can be a bit overwhelming to do all of that at once. So here in early March, this is really good homework time for you guys. But all the links are in the description. I hope this is helpful in understanding like where you can start in figuring out your own pricing as a beginner. Give you a pricing sheet from us, or sign up for Lenny's course waitlist if you want to dive deeper in understanding more minute details about all of your tracking and everything. But what should the I want the emoji to be a dollar sign because it'll remind you to price every stem, including filler, with a price. And the reason you're doing it is because you want to be making the money that you deserve to be making for all of your hard work, and to make it profitable so that we can all continue to have our flower farms each year and not be operating at a loss. But hopefully this is helpful. We'll see you guys in the next video.